On this map, the red dotted area that you can see is where 90% of Australia's total population lives. And this entire remaining area that you can see above is practically empty. Look at how much land in Australia is still unoccupied today. If it were divided equally among all the people in the country, each person would get about 5 acres of land. Now the question is, Australia is a highly developed country with modern roads and large infrastructure. So why is most of Australia still empty? And why is the population here so low? And let me tell you another shocking fact. Today, when we think of Australia, the first thing that comes to mind is white-skinned people. But history says that the original Australians were not white. So the question is, who were the real Australians? What happened to them? And are they still alive today? Friends, I am Mython, and today we will talk about the history of Australia. So let's begin. Australia. When we hear this name, the first things that come to mind are beautiful oceans, huge buildings, roads, and a high-quality lifestyle. In fact, for many Indians, settling in Australia is a dream. But even then, miles and miles of Australia remain empty. And behind this lies the country's unusual geography and a tragic history. So first, let's start with Australia's history. The British treated Australians even worse than they treated Indians. Around 65,000 years ago, during the Ice Age, the oceans were covered with ice. At that time, a group of people came from Southeast Asia to mainland Australia. Before that, there had been no human settlement in Australia. Gradually, these primitive peoples spread throughout the continent. It is even believed that Aboriginal Australian culture is one of the oldest cultures in the world. However, the surprising thing is that despite people living in Australia for thousands of years and having their own culture, the outside world knew almost nothing about them before. 1788, in 1606, while returning from trade in Indonesia, a Dutch sailor named William Janzoon encountered a massive storm at sea. Driven by ocean currents, his ship drifted southward. When the storm ended and the skies cleared, William saw a large island covered with forests in the distance. Gradually, the world came to know about this island in the southern Indian Ocean, and the British heard about it too. From that time, the British began searching for this island. By then, they had already established colonies in many parts of the world. And as you know, the British were eager to exploit the wealth of the lands they conquered. This was one of the reasons Britain became a powerful nation. So when they learned about Australia, they could not resist the temptation to establish control there. In 1770, British explorer Captain James Cook and 4 companions set out to find this new land. Eventually, they reached Botany Bay on Australia's eastern coast. Today, Botany Bay is part of Sydney. When James Cook and his companions arrived, the Aboriginal people saw them as enemies and attacked them. The situation became so dangerous that Cook had to flee to save his life. About 18 years later, on January 18th, 1788, Sir Arthur Phillip arrived at Botany Bay with 11 ships and about 300 people. This time, they occupied a large area on Australia's eastern coast. At first, The Aboriginal Australians did not engage in major conflict and instead negotiated with the British. The British convinced them that they only wanted to establish a small colony and would not cause problems. They claimed that the locals would benefit, become educated, and advance like the British. Believing these promises, the Aboriginal people allowed them to settle, unaware of what would follow. Just 8 days after arriving, on January 26th, the British established a penal colony in Australia. Now, what is a penal colony? It is similar to a prison settlement where convicts are confined and forced to work. Arthur Phillip had brought many prisoners from Britain, including thieves, robbers, murderers, and rapists. Within less than 100 years, the British had transported more than 150,000 convicts to Australia. The people who suffered the most were the Aboriginal Australians who had lived there for thousands of years. At first, the British gained their trust with promises. But as their numbers grew, they expanded their colonies. Areas taken over by the British became inaccessible to Aboriginal people. They could no longer farm there or even gather food. If they entered those areas, they were punished severely. Many Aboriginal people were forced into labor. Those who resisted were often killed. Women were abused, and children were also killed. To survive, many Indigenous Australians became servants and laborers under British control. The British first took their land and then reduced the native population to a dependent and oppressed people. Today, Australia celebrates January 26th as Australia Day, the same day the first penal colony was established. The Aboriginal Australians had little knowledge of modern industrial civilization. They used traditional farming methods, hunted animals, and relied on nature for survival. They lived in simple shelters and used plants to treat illnesses. Because they were isolated from the rest of the world, they had not been exposed to many serious diseases. In Britain, however, diseases such as tuberculosis, cholera, chickenpox, and smallpox were widespread. When British convicts arrived in Australia, many carried these diseases. As they mixed with local populations, these illnesses spread among Aboriginal Australians who had no immunity against them. The British had medicines, but according to the narration, they often did not provide treatment to Indigenous people. As a result, diseases devastated Aboriginal communities. It is claimed that nearly half of the Indigenous population died from epidemics. The red-dotted areas on the map include Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. Moist air from the Pacific Ocean hits the mountains, producing rainfall. This provides fresh water and favorable conditions for farming. Because these regions are close to the ocean, temperatures remain moderate throughout the year. The climate is comfortable and water is available. Therefore, most Australians live there. On the other side of the mountains, rainfall is scarce, leading to desert conditions and very low population density. Australia also faces another geographical challenge: cyclones. And yes, Japan is also a highly developed country. But its birth rate is declining as well, and it is moving toward a demographic crisis. I was Raihan. See you in the next video. Until then, stay well and stay healthy.